Dr. Bleetman was in the emergency room, ready for another steady day of life-saving routines, but in an instant, that rhythm was shattered. Without warning, the screens to critical computer systems flickered. The hospital's digital infrastructure had been completely knocked offline. They were under assault, but the scale of which they had no idea. Within hours, a virus infected more than 200,000 computers across 150 countries. In Spain, telecommunications are severed as one of the largest providers is compromised. 5.5 million daily train passengers in Germany are left stranded and bewildered as the display boards and ticket machines fall prey to the attack. All anyone knows is this message which appears on screen, demanding Bitcoin within 7 days to make it all go away, or the machines will be left locked forever.
Move on to the other developing story this morning, the global cyber attack.
Experts are calling the WannaCry virus the largest cyber attack in history.
Back in the UK, Dr. Bleetman was now trying to manage an emergency department with pen and paper. To make matters worse, major trauma, stroke, and heart attack centers across the National Health Service were deemed unsafe and had begun turning patients away.
So that was what was happening recently. Loss of trauma, loss of stroke, and loss of heart attack.
This attack was already threatening the loss of life. But then, as quickly as the malware made its way through thousands of computers, it grinds to a sudden stop. A mysterious but very talented malware analyst and blogger, known only by his cat profile picture, had decompiled the virus and triggered a kill switch. He was an instant hero, likely saved many lives, but he wanted to remain anonymous, gave an interview under his handle MalwareTech. For media, this was not good enough. They were desperately combing through every post he had ever made in an attempt to find his real identity. 2 days later, he wakes up to his face plastered on a newspaper with a throng of reporters pitched outside his house. This was bad. His newfound fame quickly turned sour. The FBI launched an investigation into his past, unearthing a years-old unspeakable crime, one he had long feared would come to light. This is the story of the man who single-handedly stopped the largest ransomware attack the world has ever seen from his bedroom, and now he was going to be punished for it. Like most awful things, it all started on Twitter. See, this virus was never meant to spread. The NSA has a top-secret collection called the Ant Catalog of sci-fi level cyber weapons. Think hacks, exploits, and cyber surveillance devices ready to be used at a moment's notice. But one day, in August 2016, someone made a tweet auctioning them off under the handle the Shadow Brokers. They're claiming to have hacked the Equation Group, an elite cyber espionage team who are widely suspected to be a branch of the United States National Security Agency. And they're sharing images and samples of numerous cyber weapons they claim to have stolen as proof. These are sophisticated exploits and tools designed for high-level cyber warfare between nations. They shouldn't be for sale on Twitter. Hackers have been known to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for such things, but the Shadow Brokers didn't seem to be good brokers after all, because they never found a buyer. So 8 months later, in a very uncommon twist, they decided to post these exploits for free in a series of heavily politically charged posts. Cybersecurity experts were drooling over these. But on April 14th, 2017, they made what was dubbed by CNN as their most damaging release. Among this entire list of tools, one stuck out in particular: Eternal Blue, a remote code exploit, the most dangerous type of exploit. Would allow someone to hack a system with zero user interaction. And worse, millions of computers running Windows were vulnerable to this. The NSA had kept Eternal Blue a secret for more than 5 years, using it as part of their offensive cyber toolkit. But the Shadow Brokers breach had forced their hand into alerting Microsoft. Just a month before this leak went live, Microsoft had actually published a security patch fixing the bug. The trouble is, organizations are rarely proactive in keeping their systems updated with the latest security fix. The opportunity was unprecedented. With cybersecurity reports drooling over this leak and its implications, it was only a matter of time before a threat actor would take advantage in a big way. Less than a month later, the world would come to understand exactly the danger these writers were trying to warn them about. An unknown threat actor began working fast in secret to turn Eternal Blue into a worm. A self-propagating virus engineered to traverse networks autonomously, hunting for one vulnerable port in particular. This doorway, utilized by SMB, stands for Server Message Block, needs to be version 1 in specific. It's a transport protocol, facilitates remote services like printers and file sharing. More importantly, it's open to the internet. But deep within the code, a critical flaw lay waiting, a flaw Microsoft thought they fixed in 2009. Had posted this security update, said they patched a vulnerability possibly allowing attacker to take complete control of a system, in theory, by sending specially crafted SMB packets, little network messages filled with malicious data. Glad we fixed that before anyone abused it, they thought. But the NSA wasn't so convinced, had been searching for a zero-day in Microsoft systems for years, saw this public announcement as an opportunity, wondered what if there was a workaround. In 2012, they found it. The same exploit done another way, and now half a decade later, their secret was public, and this worm, made to abuse it, was about to claim its first unsuspecting computer. But at first, it was slow, hunting for a vulnerable machine in a sea of millions, hitting the subscribe button and passing on its search. Once found, the worm injects its malicious shellcode and executes its encrypted payload with elevated privileges. Now, inside, WannaCry.exe unpacks a password-protected zip file harboring all the tools it needs for the sinister task ahead. Using the Tor client, it opens communications with these 5 hidden services. Then, it begins executing commands, silently securing permissions to every file within the system's grasp, before locking them behind an unbreakable fortress of encryption. Finally, it begins probing the network for any other system sharing the same vulnerability. If found, the cycle begins again. By the time it has changed the computer's background, it's already too late. Within hours, it had spread worldwide.
An unprecedented worldwide cyber attack.
At least 5 Australian businesses have been hit by the global cyber attack.
Since late last week, malicious software has been taking computers hostage.
Britain has joined the United States in blaming North Korea for the WannaCry cyber attack, which
a number of NHS organisations have reported that they have suffered from a ransomware attack.
This virus has impacted Germany's national rail system as well as FedEx here in the United States.
The malware encrypted and rendered useless hundreds of thousands of computers in hospitals, schools, businesses, and homes in over 150 countries.
It looked at first like an attack just on hospitals in the UK, but it's now becoming clear that this malicious software has run riot around the world.
While victims received ransom demands, paying those demands did not unlock their computers. This was a careless and reckless attack.
Russia, the United States, and many points in between have been hit by what's now a common form of cybercrime.
All around the world, people are greeted with a simple message. Their most treasured files were no longer accessible, and the only way they could get them back was by paying $300 in Bitcoin within 3 days. If they didn't, the ransom would double. Let 4 more days slip by and their data would be lost forever. To some, it was a small price to pay. On Twitter, a bot gets set up tracking payments. The blockchain is a public record after all. In total, 200 people paid 51 Bitcoins, then worth $67,000, but they don't get their files decrypted. It was another scam. WannaCry didn't make distinctions between the infection of individuals, small companies, or large organizations such as hospitals. It was just infecting any vulnerable Windows computer it came across. As the hours went by and more critical infrastructure around the world fell prey to the attack, malware analysts were rushing to find out who was behind it and what could be done to minimize its damage. Before the day was up, one analyst in particular would come out a hero, but no good deed goes unpunished.
39 hospital trusts and GPs in Scotland and across England have had to cancel routine operations, send patients home and divert ambulances.
While WannaCry was wreaking havoc around the world, in a small English seaside resort town, a 22-year-old cybersecurity researcher, known only by his cat profile picture, makes this tweet. MalwareTech had made an accidental discovery while analyzing the virus. Saw it was trying to connect to this seemingly random domain. Curious about its importance, he registered it. Was hoping he could set up a server to track connection attempts, to build a map of infected systems, as he had done for many botnets in the past, which he wrote about on his blog.
So I asked a friend if I could have a sample of the WannaCry worm. I noticed it made a web request to an unregistered website, so I registered it.
But before he could even get such a system set up, he began reading chatter that registering this domain had killed the virus. And this tweet was him seeking validation. Could it really be true? He had just returned from lunch, downloaded a sample of the worm from a friend, and barely got to understanding its mechanics, and now it seemed the threat was neutralized. An hour later, he retweeted this post from a researcher who had reverse engineered WannaCry's code. It showed that before encrypting files, the malware first checked if it could access the obscure web address. If the connection failed, it proceeded with the encryption. However, if the connection succeeded, the malware halted. The URL was a kill switch. Registering it had disabled the worm. He had unintentionally stopped the malware.
And as time went on, we noticed the infection count was steadily declining. After a few hours of that, we noticed a tweet by someone suggesting that the URL in fact was a kill switch that just disabled the malware.
But his real challenge was just beginning. He needed to protect the kill switch domain he had registered, which was under constant assault by hackers trying to take it offline, potentially reactivating WannaCry. Moreover, doubts linger. Not everyone was convinced by his stroke of luck. The question remained, who created WannaCry and why did it include this kill switch?
It was the biggest hack attack the world has ever seen, but attempts to stop the virus spreading appear to be working.
And then suddenly it was over with no warning, with no explanation.
Meanwhile, the media was now in a frenzy, desperately trying to uncover the real identity of their hero, hiding behind a cat profile picture. Come Sunday morning, Marcus Hutchins was surprised to find his face on the front page of the UK's most popular newspaper. He took to Twitter to express his dismay. I knew 5 minutes of fame would be horrible, but honestly, I misjudged just how horrible. British tabloids are super invasive. Journalists doxed a friend, then rang them offering money for my girlfriend's name and phone number. One of the largest UK newspapers published a picture of my house, full address, and directions to get there. Now I have to move.
No one really knew who he was or what his name was, but it was only after the ransomware attack happened when the media essentially doxed him and they published his name and photos and even his home address online for anyone to find.
All the while, he was still diligently working, fighting off DDoS attacks and gathering critical information of infected systems through the domain. If it went down for even a minute, WannaCry would begin infecting more and more systems. Overwhelmed by the continuous request for interviews, he finally relented, putting on a cheery face.
Yeah, so I've had people sort of inundating me with messages thanking me, saying that I'm a hero. I mean, I sort of just registered this domain for tracking and I didn't intend for it to like sort of blow up and me to be all over the media. I was just sort of doing my job and I don't really think that I'm a hero at all. Yeah, I mean, it's completely my name is out in the papers, sort of my general location is, so I don't think I'm ever going back to being the MalwareTech that no one knew.
He's truly being too humble here. And likewise, most coverage of Marcus glosses over the fact that he was already a highly skilled and active counter-malware researcher by the time he accidentally disabled WannaCry. His blog, boasting tens of thousands of visitors, showcased his unique ability to trace and reverse engineer botnets in a way that no one else seemed to be able to. This skill hinted at a deeper, more complex history with malware. Marcus was not just a prodigy. He possessed a wealth of experience that seemed to extend beyond conventional learning. Nevertheless, his mom, a nurse, was immensely proud. Marcus had become a real-life superhero. WannaCry had caused an estimated $4 billion in damages, and it would have been a heck of a lot more had it not been stopped so soon. And as days turned into weeks, I think Marcus started having a shift in how he felt about this fame. The normal world had forgotten, as they always do, but within the cybersecurity world, he was revered, had earned himself free drinks for life, and better yet, the largest hacker conference in the world was just around the corner. After a grueling 15-hour flight, Marcus landed in the United States, ready to embark on a week-long, well-earned vacation. He was meeting many of his online friends, colleagues, and even boss for the first time in person. Better yet, they pooled their money together to stay in a luxurious 30-bedroom mansion with the largest private pool in Las Vegas. They rented sports cars, had fun at clubs, were truly living it up. And best of all, his role in stopping WannaCry had earned him respect at Defcon. He was invited to VIP hacker parties, dined with journalists, and took selfies with fans. Things truly could not get any better. Then, on a quiet Wednesday, after days of relentless partying and drinking, Marcus stepped out of the mansion to collect a McDonald's order from an Uber Eats driver. That's when he spotted a black SUV. It reminded him of an FBI vehicle. But in his inebriated state, he brushed off the suspicion and returned inside to continue his indulgences. Rolled another spliff of that fine, legal Nevada weed, ate his burger, and began packing for his return to the UK. As he headed to the airport for his first-class flight home, the same SUV appeared to tail him. Overwhelmed and nursing a hangover, Marcus again dismissed it as mere coincidence. He thought it was odd when clearing security that the TSA agents told him not to take any of his 3 laptops out of his backpack before putting it through the scanner. Had showed up quite early, and while waiting for his flight back to England, sipping a Coke, he writes on Twitter how excited he is to get back home, to get back to work. Shares a photo of some nice shoes his boss had bought him. He worked remotely for a company in the US, Cryptos Logic, building the sort of tools to fight off hackers that he had been sharing for free on his blog. That's how he got the job in the first place, paid well. Then he lamented about the stupidity of boarding priority. He was getting restless, but he never made the flight, because shortly after this tweet, he was approached by 3 men, 2 in customs and border protection uniforms, and the other in plain clothes. They escorted him to an interrogation room where another plainclothed man awaited. Alone with Marcus, they disclosed their true identities: FBI agents. In a state of mental and physical exhaustion, Marcus couldn't piece together why the FBI would be after him. They bombarded him with question after question, and he still had no idea what they wanted. Finally, they gave him a printout of years-old chat logs. He had no idea how they got them. They asked if he knew about Kronos. It dawned on Marcus. They weren't interested in WannaCry, and he wasn't going home, at least not for a while. Speaking of the FBI, hackers are lurking online, waiting to steal your personal data. Luckily, Guardio is the sponsor of this video. Check this out. I got an email about a copyright claim on my YouTube channel. My heart skipped a beat, but upon further inspection, this is the sketchiest email of my life. Now, let's say I did fall for this. I'm scared for my channel, shivering in my boots. I download the zip file, extract it, and I get copyright report.doc. Oh, a Microsoft Word file. What's the worst it could do? Except that's not what it is. And I don't know why this isn't enabled by default, but if you click on View, then check File Name Extensions, we can see this is actually a .scr file, a screensaver file, which is an executable in disguise. Very cute. This is a virus known as Redline Stealer. So you know how when you log into a website, your browser will ask you to save your password? It puts all those logins into a file on your computer, and this virus takes that. A bunch of other nasty stuff too. Here's a list of Bitcoin wallets it targets. It also captures a screenshot of your desktop, steals your Discord login token to spread the virus through your contacts. Heck, maybe you've seen that happen to a friend. I know I have. It can even bypass 2-factor authentication by stealing your browser cookies. It's frightening stuff. Thankfully, Guardio offers comprehensive protection. Their email monitoring would have prevented me from ever seeing that phishing attack to begin with. And if it slipped through, their extension protection would have identified and neutralized it before it could do any harm. Plus, Guardio's anti-account hijacking feature stops these viruses from accessing browser cookies and circumventing 2-factor authentication. Guardio detects threats before they even reach your browser, unlike traditional solutions that only address threats after they've infiltrated your device. That's why over 1 million users trust it. So if you want to safeguard against these cyber threats, visit my link, guard.io/crumb, for a free security scan. It only takes 30 seconds. Plus, by using my link, which is also in the description, you'll get 20% off plus a 7-day free trial to premium features like real-time threat removal. That's an amazing deal by an amazing brand. Thank you, Guardio. Kronos was part of Marcus's past he had long feared would come to light. Always had a feeling it eventually would. He grew up in rural Devon on a cattle farm, never fit in much with the other kids. When he was 6 years old, he became fascinated with computers. Thought programming was like next level Lego, a way to build anything he could dream of and, more importantly, share it with the world. Eventually, he would stumble across a community of young hackers on MSN. Seeing them share their malicious inventions, he was hooked, had the reaction any curious kid would have, wanted to be able to do the same. At first, it was just about getting around permissions on school computers to install video games like Counter-Strike and Call of Duty. But by the time he was 14, he made his first contribution, a simple password stealer that was met with approval from the MSN group. For the first time, he felt like he belonged somewheres. He didn't even envision that it would be used for anything malicious. He was more fascinated by the inner workings of the thing. By 15, he would start ignoring school. His notorious reputation of getting around administrative privileges had spread among staff, and they started using him as a scapegoat for every tech-related problem they were running into. It was then that he began skipping classes altogether, becoming fully nocturnal and spending every waking hour fully immersed in his computer. According to Marcus, he was so big his parents couldn't physically drag him to school. In 2009, the MSN forum Marcus was frequenting got shut down, so he went searching for a new site, landed on hackforums.net. Found it fascinating. The hacks were light years ahead and the ethics much darker. Check this out. His first post on the forum were met with backlash. He was made fun of, had a lot to prove if he wanted to fit in here. After some time learning how the website worked, gaining more knowledge, and out of fear of being called a skid again, he made a botnet and infected over 8,000 computers by uploading files bound with malware to torrent websites. With these infected machines under his control, he could launch DDoS attacks, send spam emails, or much worse. But Marcus didn't actually seem to care to do any of that. He just wanted to brag about having it, like a badge of honor. It worked, and leveraging his newfound reputation, he set up a business renting out servers and web hosting to other members, called it Ghost Hosting, explicitly advertised it as a place where all illegal websites, except Cheese Pizza, were allowed. But not even a year would pass before he grew bored of the botnets in the hosting. He didn't like customer service very much. So he decided to quit and focus on something he enjoyed a lot more, perfecting his own malware. Still feeling several steps removed from any real cybercrime, and after getting his practice by taking apart rootkits and programs other hackers had coded, he started posting snippets of his own code on the forum. Impressed, Hackforums members started reaching out to him for development services. At first, he developed a kind of anti-antivirus that would check whether certain antivirus engines could detect a hack's malware. That earned him a modest $200 and a repeat customer who paid a lot more. Marcus envisioned an opportunity to make his first real money doing what he loved. Soon, he earned himself a reputation as a talented malware ghostwriter. By the age of 16, he was approached by a mysterious and anonymous figure operating under the handle Vinny. Vinny wanted Marcus to develop a rootkit. Marcus felt the time was right to move on to bigger ventures and accepted the offer. Vinny was more professional and tight-lipped than the wannabes he had been dealing with so far. He worked day and night for months on end in his room, secretly turning Vinny's idea into a reality. Once it was developed, Vinny began sending him shares of the profit through Bitcoin. The deal from now on was simple. Marcus maintained it, Vinny sold it. However, as time went on and the two chatted more frequently, Marcus, being the naive kid he was, slipped up. He complained about the apparent lack of weed in his small town. Vinny, being the cool partner he was, asked for his address and birth date, said he wanted to send him a present. In a move Marcus would later regret, he supplied both. On his 17th birthday, a package would arrive to his parents' house. Inside, a showcase of exotic weed, hallucinogenic mushrooms, and ecstasy, purchased on Silk Road. As kind of a gesture as this might appear in its own twisted way, Vinny leveraged it to the fullest. See, he had an idea, UPISKit v2, the same rootkit with new capabilities, such as keylogging, screen viewing, and web injections. A feature that could insert fake text entry fields and other content into pages that victims were seeing. Marcus, at that moment, realized what the rootkit would be used for. The tool was designed for bank fraud. You see, most banks require a second factor of authentication when making a transfer. They send a code via text to the user and ask them to enter it on a web page to verify their identity. Well, web injects are the standard way to defeat this measure. A hacker initiates the bank transfer, and when the bank asks the hacker for the confirmation code, the hacker injects a fake message onto the victim's screen, asking them for a routine reconfirmation of their identity via text message, and once entered, the hacker passes it on to the bank, confirming the transfer out of the account. No SIM swapping, no social engineering. It allowed the hackers to drain a victim's account, and they would be none the wiser. Marcus now realized how far down the rabbit hole he was. He had taken so many small steps down the world of hacking that he was a full-blown criminal. It suddenly hit him. This was morally wrong. For the first time, Marcus says he refused Vinny's demand. Quote, "I'm not effing working on a banking Trojan." Vinny insisted, reminding him that if their business relationship ended, he would share the information he had on Marcus with the FBI. It was too late for Marcus to take back what he had done. With no way out, Marcus agreed to work on version 2, but still refused to write the web inject feature. To his surprise, Vinny accepted this compromise. On top of this, Marcus had recently begun attending community college, and it was all too much. The only way to realistically cope between college, maintaining UPIS V1, and developing UPIS V2 was by buying amphetamines on the dark web and pulling all-night coding sessions. After 9 months of this crazy lifestyle, it was ready. UPIS V2 without a web inject. But Vinny was one step ahead. He simply hired another coder to add it, and now he had a fully functional banking Trojan. For Marcus, this was horrible news. He had written everything else. It didn't matter whether he liked it or not, he was now the author of a banking Trojan. Vinny reminded him, if he quit now, he'd have done it all for nothing, and the FBI was still just as likely to turn up at his door. By June 2014, the rootkit had hit the market on Darkcode, Exploit.in, and Alpha Bay, now rebranded to Kronos, selling for $7,000 a pop. For the rest of the year, Marcus was tasked with fixing an ever-growing list of bug reports on tight deadlines. Whenever he heard a siren, he thought it was meant for him. To keep up and wean off the stress, he ramped up his amphetamine intake. The only way he could enjoy coding was by reaching a state of euphoria. And as the drugs wore off, he would again crash into a state of anxiety and depression. During these cycles, Marcus met a guy named Randy on Trojan Forge, a forum dedicated to malware development. Randy asked him to make a software package just like Kronos. He immediately refused. But surprisingly, Randy didn't mind. Instead, he tasked Marcus with developing for a legitimate business he needed help with. Over time, in Marcus's eyes, Randy became something like a Robin Hood of cybercrime, had impressed him with his philanthropic goals, like donating to charities that taught kids coding. And unlike Vinny, Randy was also stupidly open about his personal life, which led Marcus to open up as well. They got so comfortable they called each other on video chat, often talking late into the morning. When Marcus needed a Mac machine to develop Apple apps, Randy asked for his address and got him one. Their trust reached a point where Randy sent Marcus $10,000 in Bitcoin. However, accepting this money proved to be a crucial error. See, Marcus had set up scripts for automatic Bitcoin trading, aiming to buffer against price volatility, and Randy wanted him to do the same with his funds. But after an amphetamine-fueled night, Marcus discovered he had lost $5,000 of Randy's savings. In a panic to compensate, Marcus revealed he was the author of Kronos and offered Randy a free copy. He accepted, called it even. The next day, Marcus realized the severity of his error. He had just exposed his most dangerous secret to someone with almost no operational security. It was only a matter of time before Randy would be caught by law enforcement and likely cooperate with them. By this point, he had already accepted that his ultimate arrest for Kronos was inevitable, but now he could see the path to his door. Marcus decided it was time to kick his amphetamine habit to the curb cold turkey. The withdrawal was hell on wheels. Imagine feeling like the world was about to end non-stop while riding solo through panic attacks that felt like they would last forever. As he battled these demons, his work on Kronos took a backseat. To his surprise, Vinny backed off after a few verbal lashings. No more Kronos, no more Bitcoin paydays. He was finally free, left to cope alone in his room with his withdrawal symptoms. A few months down the line, he was ready to make a comeback into the hacking world, but he was no longer interested in cybercrime. Instead, he circles back to his old blog from 2013, MalwareTech, and begins, once again, breaking down and analyzing viruses, then reverse engineering botnets to build maps of infected systems. Nobody else on the internet seemed to be capable of doing these sorts of things, and soon he had over 10,000 regular visitors. He was making the sort of insights only someone with intimate experience authoring malware could, yet no one had a clue. His work building botnet infection maps got the attention of a cybersecurity solution company based out of LA. They wanted him to build a similar system for them. When he did the task, which they originally thought impossible, within a matter of days, they offered him a full-time remote gig, boasting a 6-figure salary. He couldn't believe how much they were paying him. It turns out, it paid way more to be a talented malware programmer working on the right side of the law in a Western country. At Cryptos Logic, he had a fairly uneventful career until the WannaCry attack happened. Marcus had still been clinging to the hope that his past misdeeds would stay buried, but back at the airport, that bubble of wishful thinking burst the moment the agents laid a printout on the table, chat logs of a conversation he had had with Randy 3 years ago, showing messages Marcus had sent when he was 20, offering Randy a copy of the banking malware he was knee-deep into maintaining. This one conversation, frozen in time, now threatened to unravel everything he had built since. As news of his arrest broke, the hacking community was outraged. Still unaware of the actual charges, there was rampant speculation that he was arrested in relation to WannaCry. One blogger wrote, "The kill switch story was clearly BS. What I think happened is that MalwareTech had something to do with WannaCry." But soon the truth made headlines. The FBI was accusing him of creating and distributing banking malware. He was facing 10 years in prison and $500,000 in fines. He could get bail, but it was set at $30,000. And Marcus had no way to come up with that money. They had confiscated his phones and laptops. He couldn't get access to his bank accounts. Worse, if he couldn't find a way, he would stay locked up possibly for years while awaiting trial. Even more disheartening, it came out that his own country threw him under the bus. The GCHQ, which is the British Secret Intelligence Service, had been forewarned by the FBI about their intentions. They were fully aware that he was walking into a trap laid by a country known for imposing strict penalties on those found guilty of such crimes. Why would they let him get arrested in a country that he wasn't a citizen of? There was also criticism around how shallow of a case they really had. Plus, why arrest him now, years later? Were they trying to make some sort of statement? Do good, get punished? Hackers were pissed. Tor Eklund, a well-known defense attorney for hackers, heard of this bail trouble and quickly set up a legal fund for Marcus. It attracted a flood of donations. However, as a slew of stolen credit cards started contributing to it, he had to refund all of them and close it down. It wasn't a good look for someone being charged with wire fraud. Hearing of this further trouble, Tara Wheeler and Deviant Olam, two well-known cybersecurity professionals, decided to fly into Las Vegas and use their money saved for a down payment on a house to instead bail him out. They hadn't even known him. In a Wire article, they said, "We basically had a young, foreign, nerdy person of color being held in a federal detention. He was the closest thing to a global hero to the hacker community, and no one was there to help him." Their good deed landed him in a crowded halfway house where he got even more good news. Two lawyers, Brian Kleen and Marsha Hoffman, had decided to take on his case pro bono. Over the next 2 years, Marcus was relocated from Milwaukee to Wisconsin, then to Los Angeles. In the process, his lawyers fought to get him more and more freedom. Eventually, he was even allowed back online. Still, legally unable to work, the cybersecurity community had come together, donating to a newly set up fund, providing for his living expenses. He spent his days surfing and cycling next to the Santa Monica Pier. From the outside, he appeared to be living the dream. Yet, deep down, and with years of prison time hanging over his head, he was deeply troubled. Felt like he didn't deserve any of it. People were calling him a hero, but he knew, ultimately, he had done exactly what he was accused of. He couldn't understand why people were donating their money. He wanted to make a blog post admitting to all of it to clear his guilty conscience, but his lawyers made sure he didn't do that. Come spring of 2018, 9 months after his arrest, prosecutors offered a deal. If he agreed to tell them everything he knew about the identities of Vinny, Randy, and any other criminal associates, they would recommend a sentence of no prison time. The trouble was he didn't know much about Vinny, and couldn't bring himself to the prospect of snitching to get a lighter deal to avoid his own consequences. So he refused, instead choosing to bring the case to trial. As punishment for this, the prosecutors created a superseding indictment, a new, larger set of charges, including making false statements to the FBI. This was bad. Really bad. Marcus Christian, a cybersecurity-focused litigation partner who was previously a prosecutor in the Florida U.S. Attorney's Office, said, "Back when Hutchins was originally indicted, I thought there was a possibility that he might be cooperating and that he might get favorable treatment because of WannaCry. Now that seems way more unlikely. It's usually a bad sign when they're charging additional crimes, especially when one has to do with lack of honesty." 2 months before the trial, he realized the chances of getting off scot-free were highly unlikely. He didn't agree with all the charges against him, but he also wasn't completely innocent. So, on the advice of his counsel, Marcus finally accepted the plea bargain. He would plead guilty to conspiracy to commit computer fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. In return, all the other charges would be dropped and the prosecutors would make no recommendation for sentencing. Remember, had he accepted sooner, they would have recommended no time. This was a worse deal, and the 77-year-old judge was a wild card. He had only proceeded over one other cybercrime case ever. Marcus's fate was now totally in his hands. In the meantime, the Department of Justice released documents attributing responsibility of WannaCry to a North Korean government-sponsored hacking team known as the Lazarus Group. These 3 men, one as old as Marcus, have been indicted for their roles in creating the virus. WannaCry is estimated to have caused roughly $4 billion in damages. To this day, it is unknown to the public who is behind the shadow brokers or how they got the NSA's top secret hacking tools. Some have speculated it must have been a rogue insider or perhaps Russia. But now, none of this mattered much to Marcus because it was his time to stand before the judge. Just before heading into the courtroom, Marcus posted this tweet to his 150,000 followers, knowing that it might be his last one for 10 years. When Judge Joseph Peter Stadmuller walked into the courtroom, Marcus's heart was pounding. Then, the judge started on a long speech. We see all sides of human existence, both young, old, career criminals, those like yourself. He continued, I appreciate the fact that one might view the ignoble conduct that underlies this case as against the backdrop of what some have described as the work of a hero, a true hero. And that is, at the end of the day, what gives this case in particular its incredible uniqueness. If we don't take the appropriate steps to protect the security of these wonderful technologies that we rely upon each and every day, it has all the potential, as your parents know from your mom's work, to raise incredible havoc. It's going to take individuals like yourself who have the skill set, even at the tender age of 24 or 25, to come up with solutions. Then he delivered his conclusion. There are just too many positives on the other side of the ledger. The final call in the case of Marcus Hutchins is a sentence of time served with a 1-year period of supervised release. Marcus had won, was a free man, walked out of court and made these posts on his Twitter. It was a day of celebration. Yet, had he never stopped WannaCry, then he would have never attracted the attention of the FBI in the first place, would have never faced this long legal battle. In a way, it was bittersweet. Yet, at the same time, had he not, he may never have been cleared of these past crimes. He had not only saved the world from WannaCry, but also exonerated himself in the process. With Kronos and WannaCry behind him, Marcus now continues to live in the city he always dreamed of, Los Angeles. He continues to thrive as a cybersecurity specialist, speaker, and even content creator. These days, more often than not, he's uploading on his YouTube channel, which you should definitely check out. I've included a link to it in the description. And if this story taught us anything, it's that the ethics in cybersecurity are far more complicated than the typical legal system makes them out to be. Just as in the case of Alexander Vinny, who was held in pretrial detention for over 3 years with no charges after stealing more than $48 billion from Mt. Gox.